At time of recording, my very own Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra is en route, set to be delivered to my front door tomorrow. A quick aside, make sure you're subscribed because I'm going to have a ton of content about the S25 Ultra and accessories coming shortly thereafter. And look, that's despite the fact that this device, from the physical perspective, hardware, visuals, it's like 95% the same phone as it was last year, which was like maybe 90% the same device that we had the year before that. Samsung has not been doing a lot to change the hardware of their phones for quite some time, yet I purchased one. Maybe I'm a sucker. I don't exactly know what to make of it either. I mean, if we're going to be fair, there are some, decent hardware improvements. We have the new processor, the Snapdragon 8 Elite. On the Ultra model, we do have an improved vapor chamber. We have Gorilla Glass Armor 2, which is great to see. We have more RAM on the lower end models. We have a downgraded S Pen with no Bluetooth for the Ultra model. That's maybe not a good thing, but yeah, okay. The hardware is pretty lackluster in the sense that it's so similar to what it was last year and the year before. Much like last year and the year before, their focus remains on software. They're not coming out and radically changing their hardware, which is it's still good hardware, right? These phones are well made. The batteries are of, pretty standard size for a flagship. The camera hardware, especially on the Ultra phone, tends to be pretty darn good. Oh, I forgot to mention, new ultra wide camera as well. So that does absolutely count. But we have, the new software. Now Brief, Now Bar. You've got Gemini assigned to the power button. Gemini now has all kinds of extensions to reach into Samsung applications like their calendar app, apps that I'm frankly never going to use, but it's there. We have natural language search in the settings and in their gallery app, AI select in the edge panel, on and on and on. There's a whole bunch of new software. And because of that, I do expect these phones to sell pretty well. I expect them to be solid phones. You're not going to buy the S25 Ultra and be like, this is a bad phone. That's just not going to be a thing for very many people now. They're going to be very, very good. And I think that much like last year, they might sell better than people are expecting. People said the same sorts of things about last year's phones. They didn't change enough. It's too much reliance on software, AI features that weren't, useful to normal people, which I vehemently disagree with. Those phones actually sold better than the S23 model. You do have to wonder, though, how many times can Samsung release a phone that if you're not a tech expert, you probably couldn't hold it up next to the old phone and immediately see the difference before that fatigue, before that perception of laziness starts to creep in and those numbers start to dip. It could be this year. And by the way, didn't Samsung explicitly say they would do better with this kind of thing? Towards the end of last year, they made a blog post on news.samsung.com. Now, keep in mind, this was originally in Korean and we are translating it to English. So if some things seem a little bit strange the way that they're worded, that would be why. But this blog post, they spoke, I think, more frankly and it seemed rather honestly than I think most of us are used to. I'm just going to kind of read you a few snippets here. So they're talking to rather, their customers, their investors, and their executives. And they say that their achievements did not meet the expectations of the market, and they were worried about their source technology competitiveness. Many people speak of Samsung's crisis. They go on to say that they're going to take this severe situation they face as a re-leap. That's a little bit sort of strangely worded, but I see that as them saying we're going to leap ahead once again. They have a history of challenges, innovation, and overcoming that has always made crisis into an opportunity. They're going to restore the fundamental competitiveness of technology. That is what I think Samsung was known for so long, was pushing these boundaries. They're going to prepare the future more thoroughly. So, these are all like things that you want to hear if you've been a fan of Samsung phones. Like, hey, this is them admitting that we kind of have stagnated. We've not been pushing things the way that we should have, and we're going to get back to being that old Samsung. And then they turn around and they release a phone that looks basically identical to last year's phone. What gives? So this is the part of the video where I give some context, and some of you probably think, I knew it all along. He is a Samsung knight. He is defending them when they do not deserve to be defended. But I think that this context is actually really important. We have to think about this. This blog post was made at the end of 2024. The Samsung Galaxy S25 series of phones was well into development. That train was on the track, barreling towards release. They weren't going to cancel it. They weren't going to delay it. They had to ship those phones. So if these decisions were being made at the end of 2024, the 25 line of phones is completely unaffected by these decisions. Now, you can still criticize those phones for being too samey, because maybe you could say they should have come to this conclusion well before, long enough down the road, that they could have made some more aggressive changes to the S25 series of phones. All I'm going to say about that is a quick reminder that the 24 series outsold the 23 series, so their thinking might be, why would we reinvent our best-selling wheel when it seems quite obvious to me that that blog post was not talking about the flagship line. It was talking about the foldables. Unlike the S20 whatever series of phones, the Z Fold series of phones are not selling better. The Z Fold 4 outsold the Z Fold 5, and the Z Fold 5, up to this point, seems like it has outsold the Z Fold 6. Things are trending in the wrong direction. And unlike the S20 whatever series of phones, you can't look at the Z Fold 6 and say, hey, that is still top flight hardware. I know that the charging speed on the let's just say S25 Ultra, is slower than it ought to be, but the rest of this thing is really, really top end. It's the most top end processor. It's got, the Gorilla Glass Armor 2 with the anti-reflective coating on the screen. That is really, really cool. It's got the vapor chambers. It's got 12 gigabytes of RAM. I know some phones have more, but 12 is definitely still upper end flagship. It's got a 200 megapixel primary camera, 50 for the ultra wide, 50 for the telephoto, which is a 5x optical zoom. Like, the hardware is pretty top flight still. You can't say that about the Z Fold 6. They've been using the same, by and large, camera hardware for several years now. It is now thicker than the competition. They have not addressed the aspect ratio of the cover display. There are so many super crazy foldable phones that are on the market from OnePlus and a whole bunch of other Chinese manufacturers. You could even argue that Google has passed them on some hardware things, right? Their Fold is thinner. It has a bigger screen. It has a wider cover display. The Z Fold is, I think, almost objectively lagging behind the competition, and their sales are suffering because of that. Now look, I know everybody wanted to see a Galaxy S25 series that sort of bucked the trend that Samsung has been on for the last little bit and brought some really radical hardware changes, but that just wasn't going to happen. Samsung isn't going to go back and totally redo their best-selling series of phones while their folding phone sales are going down. So when will we know if Samsung is going to return to fearlessly pioneering, as they said in their blog post once again? I think the answer is with the Z Fold 7. If that thing launches and it is hard to distinguish from the Z Fold 6, as some somewhat questionable reports have indicated might happen, I think we can say that that blog post was absolute garbage. They were just doing lip service and talking out of their rears. However, there is at least some reason to think that might not be the case. We got this tweet from Ross Young, who is the CEO of Display Supply Chain Consultants, so he tends to be in the know with this stuff. This was a little bit ago, back in December, but he stated that the Z Fold 7 should basically be the Galaxy Z Fold Special Edition, and I think that this was always going to be sort of the best case scenario. The Z Fold Special Edition pretty much ticks all of the boxes that you could want. It has the better camera hardware, 200 megapixel primary sensor. It is larger, it is thinner, it has a wider cover display. If they basically take that, slap the newest version of One UI on it with all of the latest features, and ship that as the Z Fold 7, That would be the single biggest year-over-year improvement to the Z Fold line since we went from Z Fold 1 to Z Fold 2, which was a pretty radical improvement. And they're gonna have to do that, right? They have no choice because the competition is only getting stiffer and stiffer. OnePlus Open 2, Oppo Find N5, 50-watt wireless charging, 80-watt wired charging, IPX9 waterproofing. And oh, by the way, like I showed you, it's about as thick as a USB-C port, half the thickness of an iPhone. Samsung has no choice. They have to do this. They cannot roll out a Z Fold 7 that is basically the Z Fold 6. They cannot do that. The competition is just too stiff. If the S series is going to be the line of phones that don't really push boundaries anymore, they settle for consistency, consistent sales figures. It's kind of like the iPhone, seems like that's what they're going for. Then the foldables have no choice but to be the thing that pioneers. You know, that thing that Samsung used to do, that thing that they said they were going to be doing. They have to do that. And if they don't, well, I think a lot of us are just going to buy the OnePlus Open 2 and move on. I just hope that they don't think that the Galaxy S25 Edge is all the pioneering that our hearts could ever desire. Guys, I'm sure you got a lot of thoughts on this one as well, so sound off in the comments down below. Am I going too easy on Samsung with the 25 series of phones? Not really excusing it so much as just sort of explaining why I think that things are the way they are. Do you think I'm right that the Z Fold series absolutely has to do something radical to recover their sales? Again, hit those comments down below. Subscribe for more content like this. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.